I'm late. I had to stop by the Wax Museum again and give the finger to FDR.
We know Al-Qaeda, Zawahiri, is supporting the opposition in Syria. Are we supporting Al-Qaeda in Syria?
Well, it's a proud day for America. And by God, we've kicked Vietnam syndrome once and for all. Thank you very, very much.
I say it again, you've been had. You've been took. You've been hoodwinked.
These witnesses are trying to simply deny things that just about everybody else accepts as fact.
He came, he saw, he died.
Well, we ain't killing their army, but we killing them. We be on CNN like, say our name, bitch, say it 3 times.
The meeting of the largest armies in the history of the world. Then there's going to be an invasion.
All right, you guys, introducing our friend Phil Weiss. He runs the great blog Mondo Weiss at mondoweiss.net. It's, you know what, do you have like a tagline or whatever? I always say it's a liberal Jewish anti-Zionism. Is that essentially right?
We try to, we don't really say we're Jewish. We did come out of the Jewish community, and a lot of us who work there, a few of us are Jewish, but it's more, we're a little bit more neutral now, news and opinion about Palestine, Israel, and the U.S. So, okay. But yeah, I come out of, I'm sort of the most strongly identified Jew type writer. You
do talk about it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's my community I come out of. I feel like I know it. A writer is supposed to write about what they know about. This is all I know about, kind of, from being young. Now I'm not young, but whatever. That's something I know about. So I like to write about the Jewish community. Mm-hmm. Yes. And I think it's a very powerful community, so no one's going to shut me up on that one.
Well, and you write about American politics, which you're also an expert in.
Well, but isn't everybody? I mean, everyone's got their opinion about. I try to study American politics, but that's, as you and I both know, that's a long study, and there are a lot of people engaged in it. And yes, I have my point of view on American politics, and certainly the politics of the Israel lobby. I think that I consider myself expert in. It's something I've studied. I know a lot of information about it. And I have a strong point of view that the Israel lobby it runs our foreign policy in the Middle East. But, that's my point of view. But I can offer evidence to back that up.
Yeah, boy, can you. And, I recommend, or I don't recommend, depending on your choices, signing up for the mondoweiss.net morning email. This is how I, have my morning coffee every morning. And for me, it's just right. It might be a little much for some to start your day out every day that way, but it's such great stuff that you have. And did I neglect to say at the beginning there? You sort of alluded to this, that you have many great writers, and you write a lot of great stuff. But you have, I don't know how many kind of in-house writers or regular contributors, but something like a half dozen or a dozen, 8 or 10 or some kind of thing.
Yeah, a bunch. And there's a lot going. But Scott, there's a lot going on, and I appreciate your promoting us. I really appreciate it. But I'm curious to hear what you have to say about the world today.
Well, first, I'm going to ask you about this article. We can catch up on some things. We got a minute. Okay. But this piece, we ran it at antiwar.com, and I think it's really important. Political upheaval over, is it Tlaib? Is that how you say it? I don't watch TV.
She says Tlaib.
Tlaib and Omar shows the power of BDS, and that's boycott, divestment, and sanctions, the movement to boycott Israel. And so tell us about this. Obviously, this is concerning. They're being disallowed by the Israeli government to take a trip to Palestine, and the politics surrounding that. So can you just, I guess, start out with filling us in and then telling us your angle here?
Well, Scott, just to be clear, are your listeners surely aware that Rashida Tlaib, Congresswoman from Detroit, and Ilhan Omar, Congresswoman from Minneapolis, were stopped by Israel from visiting last week?
I think probably.
Okay.
We all at least saw the headline.
Okay. So my argument, so this was a big event in the politics of this issue. These women were kept from visiting days after 75 Congress people went over on the Israel lobby AIPAC's dime. Mm-hmm. And all the Democrats stood and applauded for Netanyahu. And then two other Democrats who didn't want to go on that AIPAC trip said they're going over to the West Bank. And Rashida Tlaib's grandmother lives on the West Bank, mm-hmm. and they were kept from entering Israel or Palestine by Netanyahu. So Israel thought, I think, that it could get away with this without a lot of attention. Netanyahu was playing to his base. Trump was surely playing to his Sheldon Adelson base when he signed off on it or signaled his great approval of Netanyahu's decision. But it's had massive political consequences in my little world. I mean, it's been a huge headline. It led the news when these women were kept from going in on the nightly news. I think it was, which I watch every night, NBC or whatever. It was like the lead item. One night or two nights in a row, certainly on PBS and National Public Radio, all these kind of liberal venues. And so from my standpoint, this was a just tremendous, wonderful thing that happened. And it's horrible they didn't get in, but it was a wonderful moment of people seeing Israel for what it is, a very undemocratic society. That when Palestinian American and two Muslim congresswomen want to come see what's going on with the $3.8 billion a year that we give them to oppress Palestinians, no, they're not allowed in. AIPAC, they're allowed to come in. So my point in that article was simply that we have had opposition to the occupation of a lip service variety from the political establishment in the United States for the last 25, 30 years of the peace process. Ever since the Palestinians said, we will accept a state on 22% of the land, the American political establishment has been more or less for a quote-unquote two-state solution. And all these liberal Zionists and American Democrats have said, we're against the settlements because they keep the Palestinians from getting a state, but we're for a Palestinian state. And nothing has happened. Israel has done whatever it's wanted. It has continued to gobble up that land. There has been, I don't know if this is news, but there's been no Palestinian state in the last 30 years, despite these pronouncements that there's going to be one. And so none of the sort of conventional understanding of how to deal with Israel has worked. And it's not a surprise. The conventional understanding of how to deal with a Jim Crow South or apartheid South Africa didn't political negotiation and dialogue with them doesn't work. You need pressure on these kind of outlaw operations, these rogue governments, and that's what Israel is flouting international law. And there's one way to address it, nonviolently, and that's the BDS movement. That's why these women didn't get in. They support BDS. So my point in this article was, yes, it's a great moment. People are paying a lot of attention. Hey, the last time they paid so much attention, 5 years ago, 2,200 Palestinians were killed. 500 children were killed. Last year, there were big headlines when 62 Palestinian protesters were killed at the Gaza fence, slaughtered. That's a terrible thing that's happened there. I mean, just the number of Palestinians maimed, the guys walking around Palestine on crutches who can't walk anymore. These, the bloodshed has been enormous. And yes, it has brought some attention to these human rights issues and this siege and blockade on this, on Gaza, the imprisonment of 2 million people. Well, here we had two congresswomen putting the lens on Palestine in a similar way, getting a lot of attention to Palestine conditions because they endorse a non-violent boycott movement. And I just was overwhelmed by that politically and just sort of expressing, God bless these women for endorsing that movement. It's what Rosa Parks did in 1955 in Montgomery, Alabama, when she didn't think it was right that black people had to sit on the back of the bus. And, profanity, expletive deleted, but what Israel's running in the West Bank is a lot worse than what was in Montgomery. It's a lot like what was happening in South Africa. It's apartheid, and there's one way to deal with that, and that's boycott, divestment, and sanctions, and it works. So that was my only point there, and I'm grateful to antiwar.com for picking it up.
Yeah, man. Well, we love running this stuff. But, it's essentially news analysis. There's some opinion in here, but what it is you're really, your opinion is just leading you to take the correct angle on what the right questions are to get into here, And so, essentially what you're getting to, overall, I don't know if you exactly say it this way, is you're talking about the success of BDS as essentially a publicity stunt.
Oh, of course.
As a public relations campaign.
Yeah.
Because... I forgot who wrote this, but I read recently where someone, it may have been you, said, no one imagines that Israel is going to be cut off from global capital, right? No. That, this is not an existential threat to Israel's economy. What it is it's an existential threat to their public relations, that their poor little Israel besieged by the enemy. When BDS raises the question of why would a decent person, as opposed to some Nazi, why would a decent person want to boycott Israel? If you don't know the answer to that, that's a pretty obvious question. Well, why would a guy like you want to boycott Israel? And then, good question. I have an answer. Well, see, it's like this. And then you tell them a little bit of history that they don't understand, and now they're on your side. And that's why they're terrified, is because it's not just disruptive of the narrative. It's a superior, simple, and honest truth here.
I think you're right. That's very helpful framing. And I left out that piece, too, which is a BDS drives these people haywire. They think it's an existential threat. And you just framed it right. Why is it an existential threat? Because maybe people will, open their eyes a little. But they go around saying this is anti-Semitism and delegitimization of the Jewish state and destruction of Israel and all this kind of hysterical stuff. And, it's because it really does represent the first sort of successful counter narrative in the West. I think you're right. I think it's huge, and I think it will catch on.
Yeah. Now, I got to say, this from my own libertarian point of view, that I'm for B and D, but not S. Now, I think if you're a Palestinian, then you can sanction all you want if you have any power to. I guess you don't. But that would be self-defense. But for the rest of us, I think of that as, aggression against the Israelis. Trying to prevent someone else from trading with them is a lot different than boycotting and divesting,
Okay, but what about the $3.8 billion that is going from your pocket and mine to the Israelis every year in aid?
Well, so the opposite of that is stopping it, not putting $3 billion worth of sanctions on them. You know what I mean? I don't want to have an aggression against them. I just want to stop
You can get off the bandwagon when it comes to that. You got a long ways to go. $3.8 billion that's pouring out of this country to Israel.
It's completely ridiculous. I forgot. I read somewhere about it. It's 10 million a second or some kind of thing.
Something
I don't know who did the calculation.
I could use some of that.
I'm no good at arithmetic, but B and D and PR. That's what it is. It's a giant question-raising campaign.
Yeah.
Well, what's the problem anyway? I thought the Israelis were our friends.
Yeah.
What's the big deal? There is a big deal. There is one. You don't get to see it on TV, but now that you've asked, there are people who have an answer for you. And so that's, again, like you're saying, it is an existential threat, not in a financial way, but in a manner of completely undermining the credibility of their puppet show, their charade, their Hasbara campaign about who's zooming who over there and how they're getting away with it.
I love it. And I'd say that, too, per what you're saying, someone gets to say, hey, are you trying to delegitimize Israel? And I think that the fair answer from BDS advocates is to say, yes, we are trying to delegitimize the idea of a Jewish state. Not that we live there, but we don't want to live in a religious state in the United States, and we don't want to prop up a religious state that's so obnoxious to, the 50% of its subjects who are not of that religion. Why should we call that a democracy? It's not a democracy. So, yes, we're delegitimizing the idea that this is a democracy. So I think, I'm repeating myself.
Yeah. But you know what? I want to raise this thing, man. It came up one time with Ramsey Baroud, friend of the show, and I think you republish him from time to time. You must know Ramsey.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Palestinian and great writer and teacher and everything. And so at some point, we kind of been through this exercise a few times where I'm saying to Ramsey, yeah, but what if they had not colonized the West Bank? What if they had said, okay, you know what, the West Bank and Gaza, you can have a separate state, and right of return, well, not to your grandma's village, but you can come back to a free and prosperous and independent West Bank and Gaza Strip and have a decent life and settle for that on your 22% of the land that they said they would settle for. And so, maybe they could have a Jewish democracy that maybe 48 and the Nakba is a fait accompli. They did succeed in removing all of those Muslims and Christians from the land and creating this 80-20 super duper majority of Jews inside what we call Israel proper and all that. So geez, Ramsey Baroud, in the counterfactual, couldn't things have been, maybe you accept 48, but the real problem is 67? Maybe that's kind of a way to say. And then his answer is like, yeah, but look at the reality. And this is Zionism. There's not a Zionism where the counterfactual kicked in and they ever allowed the Palestinians to have peace or independence or the slightest bit of dignity this whole time. And so you could say, wouldn't it be nice? But the proof is in the reality that these people are living to this day. For God's sake, it's almost 2020 and we're still talking about this. The two-state solution. It already is one state. They already annexed the West Bank back in 1967. We've just been in denial this whole time, letting them get away with pretending that someday they're going to give it up when we all know that that's not true.
Yeah. I think that's a brilliant exchange that you're conveying to your listeners, because our side, my side, is often accused of being nihilists or utopians because we are saying it goes back to 48. And you are saying international opinion said, let's make this a 67 problem. And the Palestinians accepted that. And you know what? I agree with you. I agree that there's a lot of arrangements in the world that are unjust or that reflect historic injustice, that there's a limit to how much we can do about, and the world came to that consensus. Look, this is what's going to, and the Palestinians accepted it. Amazingly, they accepted this idea of a Palestinian state on that, small amount of land, that less than a quarter. But as Ramsey's pointed out to you, I mean, so I'm not a nihilist. Had there been a real viable two-state solution around when I got engaged in this issue, in fact, I did support it when I came in. I said, hey, look, let's just get out of this conflict. This consensus exists. Let's just grab it. But Israel has destroyed the two-state solution. It's just, that's the truth of the matter. And I agree with Ramsey, too. That's what Zionism looks like. Zionism was not happy with, that 78%. And this will look like, in retrospect, I think, when Israel Palestine become a democracy, ultimately, and potentially with a lot of bloodshed. Let's not be naive about this, that this is not going to be an easy road. But when ultimately, there's a more democratic society there, people look back on it and say, you could have had your Jewish state, just like what you said, Scott. It was on the table, and you folks wanted more. You were greedy, and it's going to turn into this amazing historic moment. I mean, the whole thing's historic, but I think they did. They blew it. They had an opportunity, and they blew it.
Yeah. Well, it's such a basic thing, too. All morality aside, simply descriptive, not normative terms here. Yes. They took possession of the West Bank, but they kept all the people. They didn't do, and they actually did expel another couple 100,000 in 67. I learned, relatively recently. But they didn't finish the job, quote unquote, but they did take possession of the land. It's sort of like the Indians with the Hindu nationalists. They hate the Muslims so much, so they annexed outright all of Kashmir, where everybody's a Muslim. Well, doesn't that seem kind of counterproductive toward your exclusivist goals here? Why can't people think this stuff through? And the answer is just because they want the land, and the Palestinian people can just go to hell. Some way or another, they're going to get out of the way, and the land, Sumeria, will belong to the Israelis.
Okay, but so Scott, I mean, we're expressing this outrage and sort of marveling that they would even have this hubris to do this. What likelihood, isn't there a real likelihood that they will be able to achieve that kind of passive, quiet ethnic cleansing in which, they make life unbearable for Palestinians in the West Bank, and they're forced into these Banustans or into Jordan or whatever?
Yes, I mean, provided the right crisis, yes. I mean, who's going to stop them? The Americans will let them do it.
And do you think Americans of any political stripe will let them do it?
Yeah, Americans in power. Any president and his cabinet would let them do it, right?
Do you
what
see
are they
any?
Do? Stop them? Huh?
No, I'm not. Do you think there's any change on the horizon there?
Well, so that's the next topic, right? Is Trump versus the Democrats in this hilarious and maddening and entertaining crack up in American politics here, where this thing is falling apart in the most hilarious of ways, really. I'm sure you read the Beinart piece in the foreword, where he quotes 4 or 5 very prominent Zionists like Thomas Friedman and Aaron David Miller and others saying, oh, no, it's a crisis. The bipartisan consensus of doing whatever Israel wants, no matter what, and never so much as squeaking about it, is breaking. Yeah. And you have the most cynical SOB as president. Right. Like this guy who accused Jeb Bush of impotence to get elected. Like this guy who is absolutely shameless, who's willing to, try to exploit the Democrats' division and use the so-called squad, these 2 Muslim women and their fellow travelers here against Pelosi and the rest of them and all of this. Yeah. And anyway, you talk now. Isn't it funny? Isn't it something? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I mean, I'm excited. I mean, I regard this as a great thing that the policy might actually be bipartisan. That there may be partisan conflict over this. It's kind of like, I feel a little bit like, what's my, if I'm against Israel's ethnic cleansing and its oppression of Palestinians, what's my address in American politics? I've had no address in American politics, thanks to good liberal Zionists like J Street and Union for Reform Judaism, all the big Jewish organizations that say policy on Israel, our support for Israel must be bipartisan. Nancy Pelosi, this Capitol will crumble and fall into the ground before Democrats walk away from Israel. And yeah, it's funny because here you have 4 congresswomen, or actually 2.5, expressing some serious misgivings about Israel. For the first time, you have congresspeople endorsing BDS, 2 of them. And, Trump is making political hay out of it and painting the Democratic Party as anti-Israel and, anti-Semitic too, which is absurd, but anti-Israel on the basis of these 2 people. And, from your lips to God's ears, Donald Trump, I hope I have a political address for my feelings about Israel, and maybe I will get one, because God knows the base of the Democratic Party supports taking away military aid from an apartheid state. I mean, you have 56% of Democrats who support removing money, American aid, because they do not end the occupation. They continue to build settlements. So that's a great thing. In my view, that part is a great thing. Some of his rhetoric has been very concerning. As you, it's disturbing, some of the stuff he says. But yeah, he's disrupting something in what I hope is a good way.
Yeah. Oh, he's a sledgehammer. I mean, so a couple of things here. I mean, first of all, Did you see the Dan Dresner quote? This may be the first time I've quoted Dan Dresner. He on Twitter I'd probably plagiarize all this from your website anyway.
I'll look for Dresner right now. Go on. Yeah, talk to me.
He had this great quote where he said, "Is Donald Trump an anti-Semite or a philo-Semite?" And the answer is that he believes in all of the worst, most bigoted stereotypes about Jews. But he thinks they're all great attributes. He thinks they're all positive. And so that's why he's, and then the example, of course, is where he's saying, any American Jew, which I guess, by the way, American Jews vote Democrat like 80-20 or maybe 85-15 or something like that. He says, any American Jew who votes Democrat is disloyal to Israel. And then so everybody just howls that how dare he imply that Jews in America have any loyalty whatsoever to Israel, which is a little bit against the rest of the narrative most of the time, which is that American Jews better toe the line and better support this thing because Israel's the most important project of all.
Right. Yeah, and that's the piece I'm most proud of this week that I did, which is, to be a self-promoter for a moment, I pointed out that when Trump said American Jews are being disloyal to Israel, and everyone is so shocked and so upset by this, and he could be weaponizing some, anti-Jewish feeling out there about disloyal Jews, whatever. Nonetheless, he's echoing right-wing Zionists and even liberal Zionists who for generations now have said, we must unconditionally support Israel. So none of these liberal Zionist organizations is ever, they're critical of Israel, but would they ever say American aid should be removed from Israel? No, we've got to have bipartisan support for Israel. So that requires a certain loyalty on the part of Jews toward Israel. And some of the statements of right-wing Zionists are explicitly, you must not criticize Israel. You must be, Elliot Abrams, who works in the Trump administration, Jews stand apart from any society they live in except Israel. We are this is Zionism. Okay? I'm not quoting Abrams now. Zionism believes there is a Jewish people. It is a Jewish nation. It is centered in Israel.
It's so funny because you could be just as easily exactly quoting some vicious anti-Semite making that same statement.
Right.
It's the mirror image.
They believe that stuff. Yeah. So it's a vision of the world, and Trump was echoing it. So.
Yeah, man. And I like how, you use in your example here, Jeffrey Goldberg, who he's like kind of gone silent or something for a while here, but there was one that I think you quoted here where during the Iran nuclear deal, where he's saying American Jews who are supporting the president of the United States, that most of them voted for in his attempted diplomacy with Iran here, that they're stabbing Israel in the back, like in the worst kind of terms, calling them capos and this kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And Dershowitz did the same thing to Richard Goldstone when he criticized Israel in the Goldstone report. He called him a traitor and, an evil man. So, Trump, when people are saying, Trump is being so anti-Semitic and this disloyal thing, no, he's talking to these right-wing, fascistic Zionists who say you got to be loyal to Israel. And he's hearing that and he's echoing it. So, yeah.
The other funny thing about this, of course, is that any Israeli patriot should hate their government. I mean, that's what a patriot is supposed to do, oppose their government.
Yeah.
Right? Isn't that what we do every day, is try to save our country from the people in power over it? I mean, why would anyone conflate these things? What could possibly be worse, again, for the idea of the 80-20 super-duper majority Jewish democratic state than the government that rules it continuing the policy that they've had for the last half a century in colonizing the rest of Palestinian territory there?
The counterfactual, Scott, is that from the beginning, this has been a Sparta. Israel has been a Sparta society, a militarized society surrounded by enemies. They constantly tell us they're in the toughest neighborhood in the world. Maybe that tough neighborhood has a little bit to do with the fact that you're bombing Syria, you're bombing Lebanon, you're bombing Iraq. Okay, whatever. Israel, it lives surrounded by enemies. They elect generals as prime ministers, or people with blood on their hands that become prime ministers. They're a Sparta society. There's a kind of a national psychosis about, us versus them. So I don't think the definition of patriot there, I think, is pretty distorted. And that's the terrible thing about American Jews, is that we're distant from that. We should be telling them, look, my publisher, who has been to Israel 25 times and went the first 15 times when he was a young man, hoping to get into Israeli politics someday. He came home 22 years ago and said, Mom, there's something wrong when our cousins or our friends go to the movie theater and they have to get a gun before they go to the movie theater. They're always arming themselves everywhere they go. I don't like what I'm seeing there. He saw that. It's obvious when you go over there. That place is hyper-militarized and, surrounded by enemies, and it's an us versus them, and it's just so the Patriots, you'd expect that American Jews would have a little bit of distance from that and be able to criticize it, but no, they haven't been able to.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing as anything, right? It takes, I guess, the people who are literally disengaged from any decision making in it to just see it from the third person without a vested interest, without a personal interest, and just say, hey, I could advise the USA to make their terror war as absolutely minimalist as possible and withdraw their troops from the Middle East instead of waging a 20-year terror war and killing 2 million people and ruining everything for everyone for the next few generations over there. That, hey, that sounds like patriot talk to me, even though that wasn't the way it was portrayed back in 2002. And it's the same kind of thing. I think you could be from anywhere. You could be anybody and look at Israel's policy and say, this is quite self-defeating what you guys are doing here according to your own stated goals. I mean, that's how Ehud Barak talks. He says, geez, my policy has been suicidal for our society. Yeah, well, I agree with that. You don't have to be on their side even at all to recognize that they're sabotaging their own interests.
Okay, but Scott, we study American politics. American politics also can be. I mean, you're saying that's the reasonable man's approach or reasonable woman's approach. I agree with you, but how much sway have reasonable people had in the last 20 years in foreign policy making? Isn't faction and globalism and, liberal interventionism, neoconservative, all these factions that basically love military interventions overseas and running up the defense budget. Yeah. They've been pretty successful. Now they're
out of enemies, so they're back to Russia again. So that ain't good.
Wow, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be too hopeful necessarily, but it's just at some point the gap between the narrative and the truth can only be so large for so long before there's some sort of correction coming. I don't know.
Yeah, which is a lot of what Trump has played on. I continue to believe that Trump, more than any Russian interference, he got elected because of war-weary counties in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. He won those states by a narrow margin, and those are 3 places that were really hit hard by these wars in terms of local sacrifice. And people don't like these wars. Surprise.
Hold on just 1 second. Be right back. So you're constantly buying things from Amazon.com. Well, that makes sense. They bring it right to your house. So what you do, though, is click through from the link in the right-hand margin at scotthorton.org, and I'll get a little bit of a kickback from Amazon's end of the sale. Won't cost you a thing. Nice little way to help support the show. Again, that's right there in the margin at scotthorton.org. Hey guys, check it out. Investigative reporter Ken Silverstein is launching a fundraising campaign to support his writing of a new book about Marco Rubio, an effort to overthrow the government of Venezuela. This will be no defense of the Maduro regime, which Silverstein opposes, but is certain to be devastating to its American enemies who are operating far outside of their constitutional purview. Help support Ken's effort to get to the bottom of the interest behind America's plot to overthrow the government of Venezuela at patreon.com/DCBabylon. Hey guys, you got to check out thebumpersticker.com. You play in a band, you need stickers? You go to thebumpersticker.com. Maybe you have a business and you need stickers. You go to the bumpersticker.com. They'll take care of all this stuff. I created the company back, I don't know, a generation ago. I sold it to Rick McGinnis, and he's done a great job with the company ever since. They got what you need over there at thebumpersticker.com. Now, before we get to who Israel's bombing this week, I wanted to point out your piece this morning about Geraldo Rivera.
Oh, yeah. He was good.
Yeah, the Jerry Springer of my childhood, I guess.
Oh, right.
He's really grown up here or something. He's the voice of reason on Fox News. And I guess I didn't really realize this, but he's a self-identified Jewish Zionist. And
yes,
as you said, he just probably displayed his Star of David tattoo, which I thought that was against the rules. But what do I know about the rules? But anyway.
What do I know either? But yeah, it's good.
Yeah, so he went. So what happened was he was arguing with Andrew McCarthy from the National Review there, who's good on Russiagate and nothing else. And so, but tell us, because they were arguing about the congresswomen here, and it's Fox News, of course, so the bias was baked in at a high temperature. But hey, he's a regular, and they can count on him. He's allowed to speak his mind on there because he is who he is. And so then he breaks it to them, some things that they don't ever hear anybody say, I think. Can you explain a little bit about how that went?
I just think it goes back to the point that you made early in this discussion, which is that what I characterize as political upheaval, all this attention on the Rashida Tlaib Omar banning, has caused people to open their eyes a little and to ask a question. And so here you had the usual BS Hasbara about Israel being such a great democratic place. And Rivera just, the best thing about what he said from my standpoint was he said, I have friends on the West Bank. They can't travel freely. They can't even bring their relatives in when they get married. This is an occupied country. This congresswoman from Detroit could not go and visit her grandmother. And then he also said, these people have no rights for 52 years. You have 50-year-old Palestinians who have grown up with no rights. And the most brilliant thing he said in this whole discussion, which only a Jew can get away with, or someone with Jewish ancestry, I just think that if it were not Israel and it was not the Jews, if this was any other country that took this action, we would all be outraged, Rivera said. And I think he's right. I think that Israel is always the special case that gets away with everything, and because it's got this special status in the United States because of the Israel lobby for whatever reason you want. But no, they get away with this, and he was calling them out, and I thought it was kind of great, even though he is a wild man. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I really do think that we have going for us. It does matter that the truth is so contrary to the typical narrative here that when people just have a chance to finally understand, hey, the reason they're always talking about maybe creating a Palestinian state is because there is not one. Sometimes they make it seem like it's the country next door already, but it kind of is, but it's also conquered and occupied. And so, no, it's not. The Palestinian Authority is not a government. They're like prison trustees under the control of the Israelis and the Americans. And the whole thing, and once people start understanding it, I constantly, I think, I've seen a little bit of education goes such a long way when it comes to Israel-Palestine. Because people are just confused. Why would anyone take the Palestinian side? Aren't they the brown Muslim, scary terrorist side? And then when you just explain that, yeah, no, man, that's not it. These people are being treated totally unfairly. They go, oh, I didn't know that. But now that you're explaining it to me, they've been under occupation for how many decades in a row now? I see. Okay, I might throw a rock at a tank too. These are not invaders with rocks. These are defenders. I understand. Scott, it's not that hard, but you just have to have a chance to be exposed to it,
But that's where I'm always confused because I live inside this world. But, as you say, it's not that hard. We've been having this discussion for many years, you and me. It didn't take us going to a grad school or going to seminars or, to gain this understanding. It's a little bit obvious. Where is the consciousness? Where are we in the consciousness raising in the United States? How dumb and ignorant are people of this? And certainly among the elites, they can't be ignorant about this.
Yeah,
they know what's going on.
Hey, it's a crack up. I mean, this election season, rejoice. I mean, this is because the leftists aren't going to back down on this. Tlaib, whatever. She's not going to say, forget my grandma anyway, because I see which way the wind blows here. I mean, this fight is not over. It's not going to end. And Donald Trump is going to continue to ruthlessly exploit it and pretend that everybody knows that the Democratic Party is run by anti-Semites who want to destroy Israel. What is going to happen with that? Because it's so not true. And yet, even the kernel of truth in it is the kind of thing that, is an irresistible force by the new young upstarts versus the old decrepit establishment that has no honest leg to stand on other than we need donor money.
Right. But,
rather than any honest assessment of the situation. We have to support the status quo or else what? The Palestinians are going to invade Israel and destroy it? Is that it?
Well, but Scott, let's just be. I want to sound one hopeful note before this discussion ends, and that is, not that hasn't been a lot of hopeful notes, but one thing that's realistically hopeful, and that is you have seen Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg and a little bit Elizabeth Warren, and I think even Kirsten Gillibrand, asked about Israel's conduct, saying there should be consequences. And the Tlaib Omar thing reinforced that view. There should be consequences. So we have a real possibility that a Democratic nominee, apart from any caricature or wedge driving and hysteria, Tea Party style, I'm flipping the script there, but apart from any hysteria that the Republicans are trying to make about Democrats in Israel, we may see on that debate stage before the convention next year, we may see Democrats saying, guess what? We believe in stripping Israel of military aid when they do this stuff. Yes, we believe that. That would be a huge step if you have mainstream Democrats saying that. And I think we're starting to see that happen. And God bless Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib for staking out a principled position, not a radical position on, human rights violations.
Right. Yeah. And, I kind of regret that it's these two because they make pretty poor poster children for it because it makes it just seem like, well, whoever has a vested interest just argues their own side. But at the same time, it really does open the argument up for a lot of others. And I saw, I don't know the guy's name, but a Democrat from Washington State or something like that came out and said, well, I don't know. He had a very white guy name. I'm sorry, I don't know his name or who he is. But maybe we need to call off this funding. I'm not going to be pushed around by some little country.
Yeah, fantastic. And the other part of that is, unfortunately or not, we want people to care about this issue. They should care for a lot of reasons in the United States, including that we've been in all these wars that, in part, because of concern for Israel's security. But, the Jews and the Zionists really cared about Israel, and Rashida Tlaib really cares about Palestine because her grandmother's there, and God bless her. And I just think that sometimes it's the engaged factions, and you got to have people engaged, as Yusuf Manayer says of the U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights, when they say, why aren't you boycotting Saudi Arabia? He said, I would if there was an organized boycott, but guess what? I can't visit my wife's family in Israel, so that's why.
Right.
So it's that kind of thing that I feel that people who are engaged on these questions, that's often the people who are going to lead us.
Yeah. And now you wanted to talk a little bit about Iran bombing the Shiite Crescent lately, or what?
It's such a beautiful day here, but I am really curious about. I just am really curious about what's going on in France with Trump saying he's going to maybe even talk to Rouhani. I just don't know what is going on, and I don't understand why. And I think Israel may be going nuts right now because of that. And, look what Israel did when Trump said he was thinking of withdrawing from Syria. You remember that?
Yeah, they just canceled it.
Yeah, he canceled that one in a hurry. So how long before he cancels this impulse on his part? So
yeah, and I don't know. I'm not willing to bet that Rouhani would even agree to go. I mean, they've been, at this point, they've said a lot of times, and their policy seems to be they're going to try to wait him out and see if they can deal with the next guy now.
Yeah.
Because you'd be crazy to be them and deal with him at this point. Agree. I mean, what is he going to offer? How far down this ladder is he going to climb for them at this point, you know? I don't know.
Great point. Yeah, exactly, because they had a good deal. I mean, why would you walk away from a good deal, you know?
Well, and you read the New Yorker thing about how Rand really did get the job of being a go-between with Zarif, the foreign minister, and he offered Zarif a meeting in the Oval Office with Trump. And Zarif said, okay, well, let me take it back to the bosses and see what they say. And before he could even get there or respond, at least, Trump had gone on TV and denounced Iran 10 ways, and completely ruined it. So I don't know if somebody else put him up to that, or if he just did that his own self, or if he even knows what day it is or what is going on over there. Yeah, man. But listen, we should mention real quick here, make sure and get it on the record, and people should understand this because it's so important. As we know, the Israelis have been backing Al-Qaeda and allied groups in Syria for many years, as their government has admitted. And they've also been outright attacking Hezbollah and so-called, at least, Iranian targets inside Syria for many years.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But recently, and you can read up on this at antiwar.com, news.antiwar.com, where Jason Ditz is on the case. But also, it's really, I think, the Jerusalem Post has been taking the lead on this, that Israel has been bombing Iraq. They've been attacking Iranian-backed Shiite militias, the very same ones that Donald Rumsfeld used in his El Salvador option to fight the Sunni insurgency, the very guys that America made into the Iraqi army that still rules Iraqi Shiistan to this day, in a war that we did, at least in major part, for not just Israel, but Netanyahu's faction of the Likud party and his wishes there, and his neocon friends who did this thing. And here we are after Iraq War II and Iraq War III, both for the Shiite side, and we have Israel bombing the guys that we put in power there.
Amazing.
And Netanyahu says that he's going to start bombing the Houthis in Yemen too, because now, after 4.5 years of war, the Iranians are stepping up support for their proven efforts in the field there.
And again, what is the proper America? In as much as there is a regional power struggle between Israel and Iran, what is the American place in that? Unbelievable to think that we should be on one side in that, or being so engaged in it. I just think it's crazy.
Yeah, it should be sailing home is the only correct answer to that.
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I love talking with you, and I love reading and writing every day, you and the whole crew over there. So thank you very much, Phil.
Appreciate it. Okay, man. Well, thanks again. I love talking to you.
Okay, guys, that is the great Philip Weiss. He's at mondoweiss.net, and he's got Trump is parroting Zionist doctrine, that U.S. Jews must be loyal to Israel. He's got political upheaval over Tlaib and Omar, shows the power of BDS. He's got 50-year-old Palestinians have never lived in freedom. That's Geraldo Rivera defending reality from the narrative on Fox News, and tons of other great stuff like that. mondoweiss.net. All right, y'all. Thanks. Find me at libertarianinstitute.org, at scotthorton.org, antiwar.com, and reddit.com/Scott Horton Show. Oh, yeah, and read my book, Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan, at foolserrand.us.